Good evening and welcome to the June business meeting of the Penns Manor Area School District. I call it to order. Mr. Larch, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. Muscatella.
Mrs. Dalton. Dr. Boston.
Here.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Here.
Mr. Hardesty.
Here.
Mr. Larch.
Here.
Mr. Polenick.
Here.
Mrs. Williams.
Here.
Mrs. Tate.
Here.
Mrs. Smiley.
Here.
Myself, Mr. Johnston. Here. Mrs. Dolges is excused. Mrs. Eglin.
Yes.
Mr. Grimaldi is excused. Mr. Dalton.
Here.
Mr. Gramling.
Here.
Mr. Saffron.
Here. Thank you very much. Superintendent Johnson, do we have any presentations this evening?
We have none this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you very much. May we have a motion to approve the agenda as printed?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Thank you. Questions, concerns? All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Thank you. Number 5, citizens' remark. Mr. Muscatello, do we have anything?
We do. We do have one citizen remark made via email, made by Dr. Casey Crowley, and I'll just read the email verbatim. Greetings, board members. Last month, when the preliminary budget was approved, I was proud of how many of you are willing to, quote, hold the line on tax increases, end quote, and search for other ways to alleviate the deficit. However, last week it would seem that there are a few members who are planning to vote on a tax increase. As a PM parent and a property owner, I ask that you do not increase taxes. I would like to see a plan for better budgeting to reduce the deficit. For example, I believe we should eliminate our cyber school with Edgenuity and utilize our strong faculty resources and have our faculty create their own curriculums. Please respect our community and do not increase taxes. Sincerely, Dr. Casey Crowley.
Thank you. Any others? No?
No, that's it.
Any thought on that as business manager of the cyber school part? I'm not sure I have a good feel for that.
Sure. So I think it's important to note what costs are involved or what are the components of our PM Cyber program. So the first is the faculty itself. Faculty choose to teach in our cyber program. The second part of that is instead of teaching curriculum that they prepare, they teach curriculum, I'll call it canned curriculum, from a platform called Edgenuity. So there are really 2 costs associated with our PM Cyber program. The first is Edgenuity, which is $15,000. And that is that provides the platform for the kids to log into, the teachers to log into, and it provides the curriculum. Then there's the salary part of that. Our collective bargaining agreement with the teachers has a section in it that identifies that each teacher who volunteers to teach a cyber class with up to 10, I think it's up to 10 kids, will be paid $750 per class per 9 weeks. Above and beyond 10 kids, there's additional compensation. This past school year, we had approximately $17,000 in faculty costs associated with the PM Cyber program. If we add taxes and retirement to that, that's an additional $7,650. Our cyber program, PM Cyber Academy program, costs this district approximately $39,650 in the 2020-21 school year. On the flip side of that, I just ran some numbers when I saw this comment come in. On the flip side of that, if we were to eliminate Edgenuity, for example, and have our own teachers develop the curriculum, develop the online platform courses, and facilitate the class through some other platform, we really would have two costs in year one. The first cost would be the course development, and that would be at $40 an hour. And this is the bare minimum. So this is 6 courses per grade times 7 grades, starting in 6th grade all the way up to 12th grade. That's 42 courses that would need to be developed in year one. And that's just if every student takes the same elective, if we don't need to develop multiple electives. So if we look at 42 courses and we estimate we give them 20 hours to develop each course, at $40 an hour, that's $33,600 just to develop those courses. If we look at the payroll taxes and the PSERS, that cost comes to $48,720 in the first year. The other side of that is because we can't ignore the collective bargaining agreement, they'll still want to be paid to teach in Cyber Academy. So it's $750 per course, 42 courses. That's another $31,500 for teaching the classes. And if we add on to that the payroll and PSERS tax, we see that that's $45,675. So in year one, if we were to get rid of Edgenuity, switch, in year one, we're looking at just shy of $95,000 to do that. In year two, the course development piece will drop off unless additional elective courses would need to be developed. The core classes would already be developed. And so that would only come every once in a while. So in year two, we're looking at just the teaching piece, which would be just shy of $46,000. Both of those scenarios, both in year one and year two, would continue to add to the deficit as it stands. Now, there's really 2 pieces to that. First is we have a collective bargaining agreement that tells us how we have to pay our teachers for Cyber Academy. The second part of that is none of those courses are developed. So Edgenuity has all of that developed for us. We don't have to pay to do that. So yeah, so that's what it is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I already asked you, any others? Why don't you update us again on how folks can get us, find us when we have
Sure.
our open meeting?
Sure. 2 primary ways. If before a meeting or after a meeting you'd like to contact the board, you can email the board at boardquestions@pensmanor.org, or you can attend our meetings live by clicking on the YouTube link on our website.
All right, thank you. Dr. Crowley, thank you for your question. We appreciate that. Minutes from the last meeting. Maybe we have a motion to approve or amend the minutes as printed. Did I miss something?
No, you're right.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mr. Larch.
Questions, concerns? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you. The ayes have it. May we have a motion to approve the financial reports as printed, number 7? Thank you, Mrs. Dalton.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Tate. Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
1 second. Okay, Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes?
Mrs. Dalton, Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Jeez. Motion carries.
Thank you.
I
Number 8,
didn't get called.
Mr. Larch, apologize.
Yes. What am I last tonight?
You are last tonight.
Why?
Would you like to be first?
Yeah.
Sure. No problem. Motion carries.
Number 8, presentations of bills. May we have a motion to authorize payment of bills as presented? General fund, these are all for 2020 2020 and 2021. General Fund, $216,010.38. Athletic Fund, $2,104.54. No bills in the Capital Reserve, and the Cafeteria Fund, $56,256.20.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank
Motion
you.
by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton. So noted. Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes, with the exception of the Luigi's.
So noted. Motion carries.
Mr. Johnson, program updates.
There are no program updates this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, sir. We're on number 10, reports, 10A. Mr. Johnston.
Sure. Thank you. So in reviewing the agenda for this evening, under curriculum, we're going to ask you to approve a 5-year agreement with Indiana University of Pennsylvania to allow pre-student teachers and student teachers to do their clinical preparation here in the school. So that will be for the next 5 years. Also under 13B, this evening, we're asking you to approve the 21-22 Health and Safety Plan along with the Emergency Instruction Time Template. So let me give you some explanation as we discussed, and I also presented to you in the past week. This year, we are required, every school district again is required to have a health and safety plan in place, just so that you know that we have our health and safety plan set for being very flexible, meaning the fact that as we've moved and transitioned to doing less in protocol towards COVID-19, we do have the flexibility in our plan should anything come up that we're getting guidance from PDE or if we're getting guidance from the Department of Health and need to do something, we will do that. So our plan strictly is flexible in that nature. So I do want to update everyone as to where we are as a district. So currently, as the district, we are under the criteria of that until June 28th, that if you are vaccinated, you do not need to be wearing a face covering. On June 28th, as the Deputy Department Secretary of Ed, Dr. Smith indicated in her email, that requirement will lift on June 28th, making masking optional. So we will do that. So for parents that are listening, next week we start our elementary summer camp. So we are going to ask students to continue to wear face masks next week. Then the second week on June 28th, it will be optional from that point on. So as we discussed that last week and also put in a plan, we will adjust that. So parents, please, once we have that approved this evening and put it up on the website, know this, that our plan is very flexible, meaning that we are going to shift according to how things happen during the course of next year. However, on June 28th, we will not be requiring face coverings in the district. It'll be totally optional. So other mitigations will be lifted in that direction. But again, as we go through into the next school year, we will start 5 days a week in person with no requirements of such nature unless we get into a situation where we're being advised again from the Department of Health, the Department of Education, that we need to put more protocol back in place to help in any pandemic. With that said, part 2 of your approval is to approve and giving myself the authority again and you approving the fact should we get into our year and we have a situation and we need to transition to remote learning, we will be able to do that. So I just want to remind everyone that the Department of Ed has given the school districts authority once again for the upcoming school year, which again will end at the end of the school year. allowing remote learning to take place should we get into a situation where we would have to close because we would have too many cases due to the pandemic. So again, just want to reiterate, you're passing two things this evening. One is our health and safety plan. Know, everyone who's out there listening, that on June 28th, you will not be required to wear face coverings at the district. It'll be actually your choice. We will be opening school with in-person instruction. Again, we will not be requiring face coverings again unless something comes up that we're directed to. That's how flexible we've made our plan. The other thing that you're again approving is our availability should we encounter something throughout the course of the year that we will have the authority to switch to remote learning. But once again, before I move off of this, I have to thank you as a board. I have to thank the faculty. I have to thank the staff, parents and students that we were a district that were in session all last year. And that's our absolute plan for this upcoming year, that we will move through this year the exact same way. If we end up getting a situation or we get a case, we'll handle it the same way as we did last year with protocol, with contact tracing. Again, next school year, we'll look similar to the protocols that if we have to put in place, we will. But again, I don't know if there's any questions on either one of those pieces that will be in that motion. I'll just pause for a second if there is anything. Okay. Moving along to 13C, approve submission of MTSS grant. That's an opportunity Mr. Grimaldi had brought to us. Again, receiving $10,000. The focus for that MTSS grant will be on math this coming year. In the past, it's been on literacy. Next, moving along to 13D, asking you to approve a dual enrollment agreement with Mount Aloysius for the next school year. Then moving into budget and finance reports, we're asking this evening for you to approve the operating budget for the next fiscal year. With that becomes a lot of other motions that has to do with approving the budget, everywhere from assessed valuation of tax on property, the per capita tax for section 679 and 511, realty tax for transfer, income tax, also the homestead and farmstead exclusion resolution, discount penalty rates. All of those motions go together every year in June as we approve the budget. Then asking you, of course, to approve the remaining bills that need to be paid for the current fiscal year and any budget transfers that need to take place. Under 14K, asking you to approve PSBA membership renewal. The only thing that we're going to adjust in renewing our membership for next year is that we are going to add the training for board members into that membership. Next, moving along to pre-K counts comprehensive screening agreement, asking you to approve that agreement. That's a cost of $700 for assessments in health, hearing, and development for our pre-K counts program. Also asking you in 14M to approve Seesaw renewal. That's an application that we've been using at the elementary. And I should pause to say that we are going to continue. I should mention to this back in the health and safety plan. Our district will, again, for the next school year, provide one-to-one device for every student. So every student will have a Chromebook. We will continue with Google Classroom so that we are able to transition should we encounter any time that we would have to go to remote learning. So when I say Seesaw renewal, that's an actual app that's used at the elementary school that coincides and works with Google Classroom at the elementary level. The next one, 14N, asking for that approval. It's called Cammy. That's used at the high school level, and also it supports Google Classroom. So we're asking for approval at the high school level for it. And then also under 14O and P, we're asking you to approve medical, dental, and vision rates, along with workers' compensation rates, which that is coming in at a $10,000 savings from last year. Under buildings and grounds, we're asking you to approve agreement with Perry driveway sealing to seal coat parking lot. The sections of parking lot will be here at the district office, around the corner and to the front of the elementary school to the second driveway, plus the parking lot that is back behind the high school cafeteria. 15B, asking you to approve an agreement with All American Athletics to recoat the gym floors. Also asking you to approve agreement with Tom Talmadge to complete painting here in the district, not to exceed $7,500. And then also asking you to approve agreement with Straight Edge Concrete and Masonry to do some repair work at the sidewalk in front of the elementary school. Moving into athletics, asking you to accept the resignation of Mrs. Stair as junior varsity girls basketball coach. Moving down to new business, we're asking you to approve tenure for Ms. Smego as she had completed 2 long-term positions her first year in the district and then has spent 2 years in teaching in 3rd grade. So she has spent 3 years with us. Moving along to 12B and C, asking you to advance 2 teachers on the pay scale. First one is Julie Thomas. Second one is Gretchen Previch. Moving to 12D, asking you to approve an employee transfer. That would be Annette Peach transferring from cleaner to the cafeteria position that we have open. The cleaning position will not be advertised because that was one of 2 positions that we created just for this past school year. And we indicated that when the school year ended, those 2 part-time cleaner positions would end. Asking you to approve student assistance program letter of agreement for next school year. Moving along to 20F, asking you to approve our agreement again to work with Aaron and the guest teacher consortium membership. Also asking you to approve in 20G, as we discussed last month, a $100 donation to each of the 3 fire companies, volunteer fire companies that are within our district, Clymer, Cherry Hill, and Pine Township. A $100 donation to each one of those. It is June at the end of the year. It's time to appoint school solicitor. Mr. Safran has agreed to serve as school solicitor again for the upcoming school year. And then we're asking you to approve the agreement with Family Behavioral Resources. That agency provides our behavioral consultant. Behavioral consultant is being paid from access funds that we'd obtained throughout the year. And actually 1 day of the 5 days out of the week will be paid using ESSER funds out of the 3rd wave of ESSER funds that will be coming. Asking you to approve a couple teachers for our summer camp. We had advertised for in-house and we were short a couple people. So we needed a couple teachers to fill in to make sure that that summer camp is fully covered. A couple other things. Just want to remind everyone that's listening that we are continuing with grab and go lunch from 11 to 11:45, distributing those meals from the front of the elementary school and also Clymer Fire Hall. Also, we're through the summer, we are offering the senior remediation at the high school and also the elementary summer camp, which will start next week at the elementary. That'll be 2 weeks here in June and then 2 weeks in August. Also reminding you, if you are interested in being a board member serving on the comprehensive planning committee that will begin in July, if you're interested in that, please let me know because we will have meetings outside of this meeting to come up with those plans and then bring it back to you to present each piece that we complete. I do also just want to mention one other item, excuse me, that we will have to address under buildings and grounds. We have determined we have a water leak somewhere from the driveway that goes back around to the high school parking lot. So from that driveway to the corner of the concession stand, we have a water leak that we're losing 2,000 gallons a day. Now we're not continuing to do that because we've shut it off. But when we do have it on, we've determined that. So what we're wanting to do is actually address and dig up that line from that driveway to the concession stand and replace it. It'd be 250 feet of it. And you may be saying, well, why don't we just see if we can find the hole? Well, we've been trying with all kinds of devices to figure out where that is, and we can't. And another reason why we're looking at replacing the whole 250 feet is simply because over the past 5 years, this is the 4th leak. So we've come to the point that, and just so you know, if you're interested, all the other 3 leaks were everywhere where the joints were put together. So we need to fix that. So I just want you to know that we'll probably move forward to get that fixed before our next board meeting. And that's everything I have this evening, Mr. Hardesty,
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
unless there's questions.
Be sure to check out the high school activity account. We have no reports on federal programs, public relations, or the Penns Manor Foundation.
Correct.
Also, Mr. Johnson, appears that we're up to date and have no old business.
That is correct.
All right. We'll go to the Curriculum Committee. Mrs. Williams.
Thank you. I have several items tonight. The first item, Indiana University of Pennsylvania Educator and Clinician Preparation Field Experience Agreement. I'd like to make a motion to approve a 5-year agreement with Indiana University of Pennsylvania for educator and clinician preparation as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton, Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, sir. Number 13B. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, go ahead.
Approve the 2021-22 Health and Safety Plan and Emergency Instruction Time Template, Section 520.1. I'd like to make a motion to approve the Penn Area School District's Health and Safety Plan and Emergency Instruction Time Template, Section 520.1 for the 2021-22 school year as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mr. Larch.
Questions or concerns? Mr. Muscatello?
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The third item, approve submission of MTSS math grant. I'd like to make a motion to approve the submission of the MTSS math grant for the 2021-22 school year as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the final item that I have is approved dual enrollment agreement with Mount Aloysius for the 2021-22 school year. I'd like to make a motion to approve a dual enrollment agreement with Mount Aloysius College for the 2021-2022 school year and to authorize the appropriate board officers to execute the agreement on behalf of the district as presented.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton, Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Budget and Finance Committee, 14A, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the 2021-2022 fiscal budget in the amount of $18,569,280 with a a 0.648 mil tax increase in the current rate on all real property within the Penns Manor Area School District, upon which county taxes are levied and assessed as presented to the board, and which budget is made a part hereof, and is incorporated into the minutes of this meeting in its entirety, and with budget generally, and which budget generally provides as follows: revenues, $18,526,839, and expenditures of $18,569,280, and the use of $42,441 from the general fund balance. Second?
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions or concerns?
Yeah, I have some concerns. I was extremely disheartened when I saw that on Tuesday, you sent through to go ahead and indeed put a millage increase on, when general consensus, when we all were here last week, it was that we weren't going to. General consensus in April was we were not going to. I think that's very disingenuous for us to do that. And to do this now, and I have to wonder what the reason was for doing it that way. I don't know if you were trying to maybe not let the taxpayers know, that we were going to put a tax increase. Don't know. I have to wonder.
You're talking to me on that?
I have to wonder.
Okay.
And I would say shame on us for doing it. Shame on all of us. I mean, last week when we left here, we weren't going to have a tax increase. I know you left the door open when you said, well, we can talk. And if you think there might even be to do a partial one, go ahead and give me a call. So you left the door open. I don't know if you campaigned with everybody, to try to get more people to vote your way, but shame on you for doing that. A lot of our surrounding districts aren't having a tax increase, and I hate comparing us to anybody, but I'm just saying, because of the tough year that we had, we should not be doing this. So I say it again, shame on this board if you vote for a tax increase after we led everybody on saying we weren't going to. Thank you.
Mr. Fleming?
Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead, Joe. I was unable to attend last week's committee meeting due to other commitments, but I was just reviewing some of our May meeting minutes and notes, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding these things correctly. And back then is when we were talking about a no tax increase because of looking at the use of some of the CARES funds and things like that we received from the federal government. So I guess from that point, where did we go from that to where this proposal is now, I guess, is the first question.
Are you asking me directly?
Well, either administrator, whoever, because I wasn't here last week. I'd like to know where some of that, because there was a movement from where we were at in May. That was even prior to, maybe what Ron's alluding to, but just so I'm getting an understanding of that.
Well, let me start. I felt that last week, when those that were here or on the video, or what I'm trying to say, the electronic, I made it very clear that I feel that it is very important that we continue to fund the district the only way we know or are allowed to do. And I felt, to answer Mr. Larch, that there was room for movement. So I contacted those folks that I thought was. You two weren't included because I know how you feel about it. I didn't want to pressure you or anything like that. I think it's important to understand, in my feeling, that it is the law also requires, the school code, I believe, also requires to have a preliminary budget and to then in June vote on the budget. I must say, as committee chairman of the budget committee, we did not have a consensus. We had a 2-2, quite frankly. And yes, I seized the opportunity last week when I felt that there was room for movement and talked to folks and provided, I feel, more information. And that's where I went with that. Do you have others information?
Yeah, I want to get back to the question I posed to where we got. I mean,
Okay, excuse me.
Your dissertation, if you want to call it that, is fine. I appreciate that because, you know, since I wasn't here, how that thought was driven by just your thoughts of what should be done. So, Josh.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing we should know is that from the start, I've always proposed a deficit budget. That has not changed. When we talked about federal funding, I've always talked about federal funding as being a one-time source that should not be used to plug a deficit. Once we start plugging deficits with one-time funds, we find ourselves with exponentially larger deficits to address down the road. So I've always proposed a deficit budget for that reason. That deficit did not change between, maybe the amount may have changed a little bit. Actually, it did change because we did plug $200,000 of federal funds into the budget. So it did change by $200,000 from the conversations we had at the Budget Finance Committee meeting. But between May and June, that deficit did not change. The only thing that's changed between May and June is the millage increase.
Okay, but I guess going back to from where we were at, and I understand how you said you don't want to use one-time funds. I guess, and I think the consensus was at a point in time that these one-time funds were given for one-time pandemic, historic type situations we've been in.
Sure.
I think we did note back in May that as far as property tax collections go, they were even higher than what we expected. That's true.
They were significantly higher.
Okay, so when we're proposing a budget and we look at that and in the hard year that everybody endured, folks stepped up. We had an increase in collection. I think even the wage tax went up, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
From our budgeted amounts.
Correct.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
So there were two aspects of our revenue intake that were increased. We have one-time federal funding that's going to be spread over a period of time. So it's not like a matter of spending all of that money at one time, but yet looking at a taxpayer relief in a given year that's been hard. And I think that that's where everybody was sort of at, I thought. And that's why I was just sort of wondering why it shifted from that point. In maybe John alluded to that earlier about his thoughts on that. And I guess collectively as a board, if we want to approach folks independently and ask for their opinion, ask for their support, that's part of the politicking that goes on. John, you even admitted, you didn't contact Ron or I because you
I
knew
wasn't
we
an
both
admission, that was a statement, Mr. Polini.
Okay, well, that I'm glad that's a statement because I'm not finished yet. Just because of that fact, it's very difficult to move forward. And again, I look at these things, looking out for everybody who had increased collections and increased wage above and beyond what our projections were. I don't know that. I think that's worthy of being proud of our community. So when we turn and say that we need to do something, yeah, everybody would like to have an abundance of revenue that comes in, but yeah, I remember Mr. Larch brought a box of food in. It was his demonstration. Look at it now, gas is $3.25 a gallon. Some wages are flatline. All groceries are moving in an upward trend. So I guess, it's a tougher time that people are trying to get themselves out of and back on their feet, which I was thinking of, okay, there's a 1 year absence of tax increases. Everybody catch your breath. I think we were in a good position to do that. So from that, my next question is, I think it was like a $3.9 million amount of federal funds over a given period we would receive.
Yeah, yes, but could I address your first question?
Sure.
Sure, thanks. So despite the fact that our collections were significantly above our budgeted projections, they were in line with what they were 2 years ago. So, I mean, it was pandemic budgeting. So we had to, it was a dire situation. The second thing to keep in mind is despite the increase in collections slightly above the budgeted 90% collection rate, we still face a deficit in our budget. In this budget that you're considering tonight, we still face a deficit. So again, could we have taken some of those federal funds, plugged that deficit, and faced that deficit then next year? Yeah, we could have done that. And we are doing that with $200,000. But it's important to keep in mind that, and I've said this a million times, so I hate to keep saying it like this, but if you have a $400,000 deficit this year and you don't do anything about it, you don't address it in any way, shape, or form, it's $800,000 next year. We'll plug some more federal funds into it. It's $1.2 million in 2 years. So at the end of the day, yes, despite those increase in collections way above projections, they're just in line with normal revenue collections, and we still had a deficit to address, which again can be addressed in two ways: reduced expenditures or increased revenues, all of which was up for debate over the past 6 months.
Second question with the 3.9 million, what's our intent for those dollars? I guess I'd like to have an understanding.
Some of them have already been spent. The bulk of it, the application was just released the other day, so we haven't received any of those funds. But
And again, this is through the CARES Act, federal
most of
dollars.
it, most of it, yeah. So we have received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of 9 funding sources, some in full and some partial. The one you hear about the most is the most recent one, which came with the American Rescue Plan, or most people are calling it ESSERS 3 or CARES Act 3. That's the most significant one. That's the 2.3 million. But we've already received, prior to that, we've received almost $2 million prior to that. Or approximately 1.6 prior to that. The first one that we received was specifically targeted to special education. We bought Chromebooks with that. It was $5,120. Then there was the first round of ESSER money, which was $279,000. We spent that on the 2 daytime cleaners, the grant. We spent that on IT support, salary and benefits for IT, cleaning items, cleaning equipment, wireless access points, Chromebooks, and network switches. So we invested that into the things that we needed at that moment. Then there was a third round of funding, which was specific to special education, which we bought more Chromebooks for $21,750. Then there was the second round of ESSER money, and that was $1.1 million. And we paid for all of maintenance and cleaners with that money. So all of the daytime cleaners, all of the nighttime cleaners, as well as a majority of the maintenance folks for that. All salaries and benefits. Then there was a FEMA emergency disaster funding, and we bought cleaning supplies and cleaning equipment with that. That was almost $15,000. Then there was money funneled through another state agency, which was more security related, and that was for $21,155, which we paid for security and safety training, and we paid for part of the maintenance director's salary. Then there was another funding source that came through that same state agency, and we bought additional cleaning supplies. We bought additional security equipment. We paid for the postage that we spent mailing out packets at the end of the year. The year we were closed, we had to mail a lot of packets home. So we offset our postage with that. We paid for part of our behavioral consultant and part of our psychological support during that time. The most recent amount of money that we got, which was a small amount of money, was $3,432 for pre-K related only, and that was for Chromebooks and software. The application that's out now for $2.3 million, there's a very detailed process that requires getting stakeholder support, not just board members, not just administration and teachers, but parents involved in that process and how to spend it. But it's important to know 20% of it is mandated to be spent on learning loss or remediation. You already see that happening this year. So we've already started our extended school year program, which started last week. And next week, our summer learning camp in the elementary school is starting for 2 weeks. And then again for 2 weeks in August. 20% of that, 460,000 of that is being spent on learning loss or remediation programs. It's a requirement. We have no choice. The remainder of that will be spent on a number of things. My guess is startup expenses, pandemic-related startup expenses for the school year, which again, we were in school 5 days a week. So do we have millions of dollars of pandemic-related startup expenses? No, we don't. We had cleaners and we had cleaning supplies. The rest of it will be used. My guess is, and I'm just making suggestions here because I'm not the one that makes the decision. My guess is the rest of it will be used for education and offset salaries and benefits. But again, it's only one-time money. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if we're using it to offset salaries and benefits, why are we raising property taxes? Why is there a deficit? It's important to note that the money, the local money, or the everyday or every year state funding that we get and the federal funding we get, we didn't remove that from our budget, because the second we remove that from our budget and use a one-time funding source, we're going to be sitting down here next year going, how do we fill a gap of $1 million? So I never removed the money out of our budget and plugged it in with one-time money, because as soon as we do that, we won't know what to do with our budget the following year. So the money that was always in the budget for those things stays in there, and we will apply the federal funding to that as soon as it's been determined what that's going to be spent on. So we have a plan. I mean, the bottom line is we have a plan, and we're going to be fiscally responsible with that money and do what we can with it.
Okay.
But in your plan, do you plan to cut expenses? Because that is the way you make it work when you don't have a tax increase.
Sure.
You plan to cut expenses. And you know what I've been talking about, our biggest expenses, of course, salaries and benefits. We've
Sure.
talked about some of the benefits, some of the different things we're going to do with addressing some of those issues. You leave that part out. A penny saved is a penny earned,
Sure.
So, we're still going to cut expenses to
And we
make
should.
up any difference.
And we should. I don't disagree with you. I agree that to be fiscally responsible, not only do we need to firm up our revenues, but we also need to make sure that we're spending fiscally responsible on the other side. It's important to note that we've had multiple discussions about how we can reduce our expenditures. Contract negotiations that are coming up. That's one. Two, I know that sometimes these things go to the wayside after we vote on them, but let's not forget that when the district issued a bond a couple of years ago, the credit rating of the district was upgraded, and we saved $250,000 on that bond issue. The third thing I'm going to point out is that you have an agenda item on there tonight. It's not a lot, but we're saving $10,000 on our workers' comp policy tonight. So this district, this administration, Mr. Johnston and the rest of the administration and this board has diligently and purposefully saved money in ways that it can. And I can tell you right now, there is never a situation where somebody wants to spend money in this district where I take the first quote or the first vendor. It never happens. We're not even required to bid our workers' compensation policy. It's not a requirement. We do that because it's necessary. So yes, a penny saved is a penny earned, and we do that here for sure. But to your point, salaries and benefits is 70% of our budget. We can't go hacking and slashing. It's not possible. You can't just go taking things from people. And I think you made a comment at one point in time that.
But wait, yes, you take from the taxpayers. So
I just mean you can't
so-
you can't take from contracts. You can't just go. You can't renege on contracts. So at the end of the day, and I think it was you that pointed this out, it opened up your eyes to find out that to save in contracts or save in salaries and benefits, it's an incremental save. It's over time.
Mhm.
And we've made, before I started here and even now, we've made huge strides in our collective bargaining agreements, both on active employee expenditures as well as post-employment benefits, huge strides. So yes, this district, I'm very pleasantly surprised, has been extremely fiscally responsible, both in the time that I've been here, as well as for the decades prior to me. And that's why our district was able to have an increase in their credit rating. There's a reason why that happens. Districts don't receive increases in their credit rating if their fund balances are weak, if their budgeted revenues and expenditures are exceeding thresholds, or are going outside of the norms. So yes, this district is very fiscally responsible.
agreed. But you have to be honest and say, if we do not have a tax increase this one year, a pandemic year, it is not going to sink our our district.
It would not sink our district.
We would be okay next year.
And yes, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with you. I would just ask you, Mr. Large, to offer some alternatives to how we will address the $800,000 deficit.
Well, we're going to cut expenses, and you don't know that it's going to be. You see, throwing these numbers out, we do not know that it's going to be
Well, it's
$800,000.
$400,000 this year, and historically, it's anywhere between $300,000 and $400,000 on average. So I have a pretty good idea what it's going to be. It will be at least $700,000 next year. It will be this year's deficit plus next year's deficit, and by the third year, it will be close to $1 million, if not more. You know, the deficits don't slow down; they don't compound
Without cutting expenses.
without doing
And we
something.
have that opportunity coming up. So,
We sure do.
so that's out there. You know, 1 year is not going to sink the ship. You know, 1 year of relief is not going to sink the ship. So, I mean, I know you paint, that's your job, and I appreciate that. You paint this dire warning, you know, that we're going down a dark path by not having a tax increase. And again, I know that's your job, and I thank you for that. But 1 year of giving relief to our taxpayers is not going to ruin our budget forever. You have to agree there.
I do. And out of the 4 years that I've been here, we have taken from our fund balance despite raising property taxes. So yes, it has been dire. My budgets that I propose aren't dire. They're fairly accurate, and we have taken from the fund balance 2 out of the 4 years that I've been here. Last year we added because we were only open for 130 days, and we continue to receive the funding. So yeah, the budgets I propose are not dire. They're accurate.
Can I just make a comment?
Please go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I just wanted to let the board know and remind them, I know that they are aware of this, that we start working on the budget as part of the Budget and Finance Committee very early on. We have a whole year. As soon as we pass one, we start working on another one. And so I'm glad that we're having discussion. I just wish this type of discussion could happen early on in the budget, offering ideas, suggestions, solutions, all of those types of things at the budget and committee finance meetings. It's open to all of us. Everyone is welcome, but they are very poorly attended for the most part. So because this is one of the biggest tasks that we face every year, I just hope that going forward in the future, that we could have some more attendees at these meetings to try and get a handle on this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, I'd just
Mrs.
like to say,
Reckenrode?
yeah, I'd like to say, please, just generally, I can fairly confidently say that there's not one person sitting on this board who wants to raise taxes or who gets any pleasure out of raising taxes. I've been on this board for 14 years. And aside from having to furlough people several years ago, voting to increase taxes is by far the hardest decision that I ever had to make. Personally, and I'm not trying to defend John, but no one talked me into anything. At the last week's meeting, I listened very carefully to Josh when he gave his analogy of the budget. And what does it for me is what he just ended with by talking about the deficit compounding. Now, you're right, Ron. If we don't raise taxes this year, our district more than likely is not going to go under. You're right. But we seem to ignore what he tells us about the deficit compounding year after year. I mean, he tells us this. I believe him, and we either choose not to believe him or we just ignore it. And that is why I cannot ignore it. It will compound and we'll be in even a worse situation. As far as cutting expenditures, I'm the chairperson of the negotiations committee. Our last contract, was it perfect? No, but we made great strides with that last contract. And we've already talked about, things we're going to bring up in the next negotiations to try to get a more level contract, something that's more workable for our district, that'll benefit our district more. None of us here get paid to do what we do, not a dime, you know that. And you know, I don't know, through this last election cycle and with social media, and I read all these comments and, you know, people are on our case about this and about that. And one of the things that I read a lot that really upset me was that our district needs to be more responsible with their budget. I take offense to that because I think we have been very responsible with our budget. We have always been very prudent, very responsible. The gas line, I could go on and on and on, the things that we have done to try to save this district money. And I think we've done a good job. And I think that maybe too, instead of pointing fingers at board members all the time, maybe we should look at maybe some of our state and local officials. Like, what have they done to help school districts? What have they done? Nothing. Okay. So maybe, you know, the people that are angry with the board all the time about things, we are 9 people that don't get paid a dime, that have very difficult decisions to make. And sometimes we have to make decisions that aren't popular, but we do the best we can. I'm not ashamed. I don't like raising people's taxes. I feel very bad about that, but I'm elected to this board for this school district, and our responsibility is to keep this school district solvent and viable. That's the way I look at it. No one talked me into anything. I make up my own mind. I listen to Josh. I trust Josh, and that's what I have to go by.
Just to follow up, to get back, and Wendy, to your point, we did have a discussion, and that's what I was referring to our May meeting. So we had some discussion, and I think a few of us had attended a few of the meetings, maybe not all of them since the beginning. So I think there was some participation. More would be better for sure, but it's very difficult. When we talk about some of these additional expenses, and that's the only way you can moderate a budget without raising revenues, I always go back to wants and needs. And, you know, just me being the chairman of the Building and Grounds Committee, I see 4 different items on here. Do we need the driveway sealed this year for $7,500? Is that a want or is it a need? I see sealing the gymnasium floors. Is it a want or is it a need? $6,900. Painting outside, want or need? $7,500. Replacement of the sidewalk, $8,650. So, you know, those things from my mind and my perspective, the nickel dime things, is like I had mentioned before. When this was first brought up in the January, February timeframe about budgets and where we were at, I made a statement that said, no more building items because we can't afford it. And here we are with some of these things. Granted, some safety, I could see the sidewalk being safety. Is the sealing of the floor a safety item, want or need? I don't know if it's a hazard. Is it painting? Is that a hazard? Is that a want or a need? Those are the things that are nickel dime that I add up in my mind at this snapshot of time. That's over $20,000 right there, easily. So that's what makes me sometimes think fiscally responsible. Yeah, we are. We do the best we can do. We did a roof project that was dire and it was needed. We put a gas line in and we saved money. The nickel dime things is what catches up to you at the end. It's like a home budget. So I understand where everybody's coming from, and I thought we were in a certain place in May. And unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't here last week, and that's why I brought this comment up, and it's good discussion. And granted, nobody wants to raise taxes. But I mean, as we look at this point in time, it's one of these things that we're saying to ourselves, is it wanted or is it needed? That is tax increase. That was just a comment I wanted to make and a few points to get it clear in my mind. And I don't want to offend anybody. I'm sorry, John, if I offended you or pointed
You're
you out
always
or anything
worried
like
that you
that.
offend me, and you don't. I just
Well, I mean, there's just times that I comment on things because, as Jill said, we do not get paid a dime for this.
Mhm.
So if I'm elected here and I want to put my time into something, I'm getting a value back out of it by having my comments spoken and discussed. And I wish
Absolutely.
everyone else would as well.
I think we do, don't we?
Yeah, I think we do.
Anyone else?
One more item, going
Yes, sir.
forward, as we discuss budgets in the future, and as we discuss wage increases in the future, I'd like, Josh, you to provide us with what, if we give a wage increase to a group or somebody, or if we do something different with the benefits that might cost a little more, I want to see how that affects our budget. So oftentimes we do all this stuff in January when the budget season isn't in effect. And, you know, we might give a raise which is, I know everybody would like to have a raise, but evidently we can't afford it. Evidently we can't afford it. So I would like, before we vote on a wage increase for anybody, I want to see how that affects the budget. Because if that makes more of a deficit, then we need to know that.
I don't think I've ever not shared with you what a wage increase is going to be.
Right. But I like to see, a bottom line number.
Sure.
I mean, you're now telling us that, we're going to be have this much deficit. We're going to do this, but so often we don't actually get to see the number, because, or a close guesstimate of what that number will be or what that will do to the budget.
Sure. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Others? Well, let's call the question. Roll call, Mr. Muscatello?
Just want to make sure I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Larch,
No.
Mr. Polenick,
No.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton, Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 14B, assessed valuation of property. The following resolution provide the tax revenue needed in order to fund the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget local effort, and all the following resolutions are adopted relative to the 2021-2022 fiscal year, beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. I would like to make the motion to levy and assess for the 2021-2022 fiscal year, beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022, a tax on all real estate property within the Penns Manor Area School District upon which the county taxes are levied and assessed at the rate of 15.3768 mills of the assessed value on such real property as provided by the Indiana County Board of Assessments, which equates to $1.5378 or 68 cents per $100 of assessed valuation of taxable property. Second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions, concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch,
No.
Mr. Polenick,
No.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton, Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, sir. 14C, per capita tax under section 679 of the Public School Code. I would like to make a motion to levy, assess, and reenact a per capita tax of $5 under section 676 of the Public School Code of 1949 as amended on each resident or inhabitant of the Penns Manor Area District of the age of 18 years or older.
Section 679.
679, excuse me. Thank you.
Sure.
Second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Roll call?
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Plenick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton. Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
14D, per capita tax under Section 511 of the Local Tax Enabling Act. I would like to make the motion to levy and assess a per capita tax of $5 on each inhabitant or resident of the Penns Manor Area School District of the age of 18 years or older under the provisions of the district's per capita tax resolution adopted in accordance with Act 511, which resolution shall continue in full force and effort without annual reenactment. Second, please.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Williams.
Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Plenick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
14E, Realty Transfer Tax. I would like to make a motion that the Board of Directors continues to levy and assess a real estate tax at the rate of 1% of the value of all real estate transferred within the Penns Manor Area District, pursuant to and in accordance with the provisions of the Realty Transfer Tax Resolution of the Penns Manor Area School District, the resolution adopted and enacted by the Board of School Directors on June 26, 2008, and which resolution by its term shall continue in full force and effect without annual reenactment, and which realty transfer tax is currently shared with other municipalities. Second, please.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Mr. Muscatello?
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Plenick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
14F, Earned Income and Net Profits Tax. I would like to make a motion to levy and assess an earned income and net profits tax on earned income received and net profits earned by the residents and inhabitants of the Penns Manor Area School District at a rate of 3/4 of 1%, for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022, pursuant to and in accordance with the provisions of the resolution repealing the occupation tax and restating and amending a resolution imposing a tax on earned income and net profits of the individual residents of the Penns Manor Area School District, adopted by the Board of School Directors on May 28, 2003. May 8th. School Directors on May 8th, 2003, the resolution, and which resolution by its term shall continue each year thereafter without annual reenactment, and which resolution shall continue in full force and effect until the repeal thereof or until the rate of tax is changed. Second, please.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polinick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
14G, Homestead and Farmstead Exclusion Resolution. I would like to make a motion to adopt the Homestead and Farmstead Exclusion Resolution as presented, which establishes the maximum real estate reduction amount applicable to each approved homestead and to each farmstead of $179.04. The full text of said resolution being attached as an enclosure and is incorporated into this motion in its entirety and shall be made part of the official minutes of this meeting. Second, please.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Mr. Muscatello, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polinick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
14H, discount and penalty rate. I would like to make a motion to set the discount rate of 2% and the penalty at 10% on real estate taxes and per capita taxes.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. Questions or
Sorry, a
concerns?
motion by Mr. Hardesty and a
Oh.
second by Mr. Larch.
Yes, sorry. Questions, concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polinick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
14I, approved to pay remaining bills for the 2021 fiscal year. I would like to make the motion to approve and authorize the business manager to pay all remaining bills for the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Questions? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polinick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
14J, approved budgetary transfer for the 2021 school year or fiscal year. Let me do that again. Approved budgetary transfer for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. I would like to make a motion to authorize the business manager to perform budgetary transfers for the year ending July 30th, 2021 as June 30th. Thank you. As well as determine the amount to be committed, if necessary, to the committed fund balance per district board policy number 620 from the unassigned fund balance following the completion of the annual local audit.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polinick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
14K, PSBA membership renewal. I would like to make a motion to approve the following membership opportunities with the Pennsylvania School Boards Association for 2021-2022. Standard membership, $3,543.43. Policy maintenance, $1,250. Administrative regulations, $899. and live and online training, $999, for a total cost of $6,691.43. Needing a second.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Williams.
Questions and concerns? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
14L, Pre-K Counts Comprehensive Screening Agreement. I would like to make a motion to approve an agreement with Life Steps, Inc. as presented to administer development screening, mental health screenings, and hearing screenings to the pre-K count students at Penns Manor Area Elementary School at a total cost of $700. Second, please.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions? Mr. Muscatello, roll call, please.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I would like to make a motion to approve a one-year agreement with Seesaw for the 2021-2022 school year in the amount of $2,013 as presented. This is number 14M. Second, please.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Questions, concerns? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams? Mrs. Williams? We'll come back. Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. 14N, approve Cammy renewal. I would like to make a motion to approve a one-year agreement with Cammy for 2021-22 school year in the amount of $2,796 as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Sure. Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
14O, medical, dental, vision rates for 2021-2022. I would like to make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 medical trust rates, vision trust rates, and dental trust rates as presented.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Questions or concerns? Let's have a roll call.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. 14P, workman's compensation. I'd like to make a motion to purchase workers' compensation insurance from Technology Insurance Company, AMT Trust, for the 2021-2022 fiscal year at a cost of $25,987 as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mr. Larch.
Questions? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Polinick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
yes,
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
15, Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Polinick.
Item 15A, approve agreement with Perry driveway sealing for parking lot sealing. I'd like to make the motion to approve the agreement with Perry driveway sealing at a cost of $7,500 to seal coat the parking lot and paint parking lines as presented. Cost will be covered using the 2021-22 Building and Grounds General Operating Funds.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Polinick and a second by Mrs. Smiley.
Questions or concerns? Let's have a roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Polinick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
yes,
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Second item is 15B, approve agreement with All American Athletics to recoat gym floors. I'd like to make the motion to approve an agreement with All American Athletics for recoating the elementary and high school gym floors as presented for the total cost of $6,900. Cost will be covered using the 2021-22 Building and Grounds General Operating Funds.
A second.
I have a motion by Mr. Polinick and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Polinick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
yes,
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
15C, approve agreement with Tom Talmadge Painting for painting. I'd like to make the motion to approve an agreement with Tom Talmadge Painting for painting of facilities at a cost not to exceed $7,500 as attached. Cost will be covered using the 2021-22 Building and Grounds General Operating Funds.
I'll second.
I have a motion by
Second.
Mr. Polinick, a second by Mr. Larch.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Polinick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
yes,
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 15D, approve agreement with Straight Edge Concrete and Masonry LLC. I'd like to make the motion to approve an agreement with Straight Edge Concrete and Masonry LLC to complete work on the district sidewalks as presented at a cost of $8,650. Cost will be covered using the 2020-21 Building and Grounds General Operating Funds.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Polinick, a second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions?
Just one
sorry.
question on that, there was an adjustment to the funds it was coming out of. It's this year's budget, 2020, 21? Correct. Okay. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Roll call.
Sure. Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Polinick.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, Mr. Polinick. Number 16th, Athletic Committee. Mr. Larch.
Yes, I have an item. 16A, accept the resignation of junior varsity girls basketball coach. I'd like to make a motion to accept the resignation of Mrs. Rebecca Stower as junior varsity girls basketball coach and grant the administration permission to post and advertise for this position.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Larch and a second by Mrs. Smiley.
Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Sure. Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Plenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
yes,
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Larch.
Thank you.
Point of interest on my part, Mrs. Eckenrode, did I ask for your negotiations report or did I just forget it?
You forgot me, but that's okay. I didn't have anything, Mr.
Thank you,
Hardesty.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Sorry for that. All right, Transportation Committee, Mrs. Tate.
I do not have anything tonight, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, Mrs. Tate. Policies,
No policy revisions for this month,
correspondence?
and there's no correspondence.
Okay. Okay, we're into new business. 20A, approved tenure for Mrs. Elizabeth Smago. We need a motion to grant tenure to Elizabeth Smago as a professional employee who has satisfied the requirements of the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Public School Code of 1949 as amended regarding tenure status. The district will provide written notice of the grant of tenure to Elizabeth Smago. May I have a motion, please?
make a
I'll make the
motion.
motion.
Second,
I have a motion by Mrs. Tate. Thank you very much. I have a second by Mrs. Williams.
Questions, concerns? Roll call.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Plenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
yes,
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
20B, approved change in salary to masters plus 20. We need a motion to advance Mrs. Julie Thomas from the level of master's step 14 to master's plus 20 step 14 of the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Area Education Association dated August 1, 2019 through July 31st, 2022. The annual salary of this step is $82,099 and will be effective on August 23rd, 2021.
I'll make the motion.
Looking for a second.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mrs. Eckenrode and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Plenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
yes,
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
20C, approved change in salary to master's degree plus 20. We need a motion to advance Mrs. Gretchen Prebich from the level of master's step 12 to master's plus 20, step 13 of the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 through July 31, 2022. The annual salary of this step is $76,214 and will be effective on August 16th, 2021.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Dalton and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions or concerns? Let's have a roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Plenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
yes,
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 20D, approve employee transfer. We need a motion to approve the transfer of Annette Peach from cleaner to cafeteria worker effective June 18th, 2021.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Larch and a second by Mrs. Smiley.
Thank you. Questions, concerns? Roll call, Mr. Moscatello.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Plenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
20E, approve a student assistant program letter of agreement. We need a motion to approve a letter of agreement with the Indiana County Community Guidance Center, whereby the Indiana County Community Guidance Center and the Penns Manor Area School District agree to work cooperatively together to provide continuity of care, aftercare, and follow-up, as well as timely transfer of patients and records for any student who may receive services through the Indiana County Community Guidance Center. The agreement is for the 2021-2022 school year.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Tate and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Questions or concerns? Josh, let's have a roll call.
Sure. Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Plenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
20F, Aaron Guest Teacher Consortium, membership 2021-2022. We need a motion to participate in the Aaron IU 28 Guest Teacher Program during the 2021-2022 school year at the cost of $500.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Dalton and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Oh, I'm sorry. And I have a second by Mrs. Smiley. Thank you.
Questions? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Plenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
20G, approved donations to local fire departments. We need a motion to approve a donation to the Cherry Hill Township Volunteer Fire Department, Pine Township Volunteer Fire Department, and the Clymer Volunteer Fire Department in the amount of $100 each.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Larch and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Plenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. 20H, appoint school solicitor. We need a motion to appoint Ronald J. Safran Esquire as the district solicitor for a one-year term upon the term set forth in the agreement per the enclosure at a contracted retainer rate of $3,500 and an hourly rate of $75. Fees for work related to insurance and/or issuance, thank you, and/or refunding bonds, notes, and other obligations shall be negotiated by the district and the solicitor at the time of such borrowings and shall reflect the rates customary in the industry at such time.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions or concerns?
Just one comment, Mr. Hardesty. This is Mr. Safran's 29th year with our district. I know time flies when you're having fun, right?
Thank
Did you announce the first and second on the?
I'm sorry.
motions?
I had a motion by Mrs. Eckenrode and a second by Mr. Larch.
Questions or concerns? Let's roll call.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Plenick?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The 20I, approve Family Behavioral Resources Agreement for 2021-2022. We need a motion to approve the agreement with Family Behavioral Resources, AERI, for the 2021-22 school year as presented at a cost of $78,758.77.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Dalton and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions? Roll call.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
20J, approve substitute teachers for summer camp and ESY. We need a motion to approve the following substitutes for summer camp and ESY pending all current clearances: Gina Buterball, Lauren Smith, Mara Deanna.
I'll make a motion. Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Tate and a second by Mrs. Williams.
Thank you both. Questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Under 20K, we have student recognitions. PMA Student of the Month for June, Allison Polenick. Heritage Scholar Athletes, Sportsmanship, Wynn Stahl and Brandon Dunmeyer. Heritage. Did I cut something out, or is that Allison Polenick and Reese Hayes? Indiana County Sports Hall of Fame, Anna Peterman and Dimitri Lee. Our congratulations to each of these students. 21, seeking a motion to approve the requested field trips and conferences as attached.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Eckenrode and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, sir.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Our upcoming meetings are a committee meeting on July 1st at 7 PM in this room, and a business meeting July 8th at 7 PM here. Anything good for the good of the order? Anything more for the good of the order? Meeting adjourned. Good evening, all. 9 years. Wow.